Hello everybody, been quite a while, but I think it's about time I put up another video. So today what we're going to focus on is the idea of a little drill slash warm-up I've been doing with the sword in one hand. Now, what specifically prompted this was I've been focusing on use of both hands actively when I'm using a two-handed weapon, so making sure that they're both doing their respective jobs. If you saw my video about proper grip, I talk a little bit about that. But I came up with a series of exercises that's been having pretty good effect on me and those that have been doing it with me, so I figured, why not show everyone else? So the very first thing we're going to do is just a nice light little warm-up, which is we're going to use Fiore's plays with the one-handed sword. We're just going to use a volta stable and going into posta di donna and then corolonga. So here's what that looks like. So for Fiore, you're going to turn your toes back and shift your weight onto your back leg. The reason is that the way he likes to exert force is by turning his hips into it and then stepping forward with his foot when he's ready. For our purposes though, it'll just be getting everything down there warmed up. So I go up into posta di donna, which is here on my shoulder. My toes are pointing back, my hip is actively shifted, so my weight is on this leg. Then I'm going to turn and shift down into corolonga. So I'm ready to deal with this guy. I'm ready to deal with this guy. This guy. This guy. Do that for a little bit. Then you're going to take your left hand and put it on, as if I were doing it in a two-handed grip, I'd have my hand here. This guy. This guy. Just down and back a couple times. And after you've done that, you can start extending into your cut. Now, important thing about cutting out of this position is to make sure that you don't end up all crossed up. So let me show you what I mean. So if I'm facing the camera right now, when I take this position, I should be here, which is pretty much the same distance as though I were standing with my toes square. It's just ever so slightly kicked off. I don't want to be too linear, because if I cut at you, that means I'm going to end up like this, and I can't maintain my balance. If my foot is slightly kicked off to the side, my hips are open, they're just turned backward a little bit. When I extend through with my cut, I'm perfectly stable. So, same thing on both sides, obviously. So what you're really cutting at is kind of a wide V angle, as opposed to one side then the other. So here's a little bit what that looks like. And make sure to extend fully and with control. So, boom, down, boom, down. Like that. And switch hands. And once you've done that for a little bit, that's pretty good. So, the next part of it is going to be cutting with the one-handed sword. So, what you're going to do is you're going to move into, I recommend taking ox. Then you're just going to take your left hand off, and it's down, down, up, up. So you can do the Meyer cutting pattern or something along those lines. It doesn't particularly matter. Just cut through this, I recommend 4 times, so that'd be 8 total, no, 4, yeah. You'd be looking at, I think, 16 total cuts. But after you've gone through that, switch hands. So now you're cutting with your left hand, but on where it belongs. So I'm not going to do this left-handed. I'm going to keep my left hand down here. And you'll find very quickly that ensuring that this stays stable is not as easy as it seems. Important things to focus on when you're doing this. Make sure that the tip is not lagging behind, so if I'm coming from the side, I don't want, especially on my rising cuts, that nonsense. That's not a very good cut. I should engage my wrist so that the cut rises out of it. Make sure that you're aiming and make sure you're keeping it controlled. If you can't do it at that speed fluidly, don't do it at that speed. Do it at whatever speed you can where you're able to maintain control of the blade. After you've done that, stay in that position, go back up into ox. Take your left hand off again. I'm going to start thrusting into ox, thrust into flug, thrust into flug, thrust into ox. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Things to be sure of. Make sure that your cross guard is staying at its appropriate 45-degree angle. So if I'm on this side, it should be here. On this side, it should be here, here, here. Make sure that when you're thrusting from ox to ox, extend, transition, don't fully withdraw a little bit, then extend again, as opposed to cocking it back. Because if you cock it back after you thrust, you're not actually going to be defending yourself all that much. So, though I should talk about that in another video. After you've gone through that a couple times, go back up into the first oct you started and take your right hand off. Same drill as before, just now you're using your left hand on it. Particularly good one. Once you finish that, we'll move into some more cutting with it, which is we're going to cut using the rolling cut pattern. So if you saw my video on that, this should feel pretty familiar to you. But to reiterate, I recommend starting off in flug, but with your left foot forward. So I'm going to prepare to my inside, cut down to my right as I step forward with my right foot, prepare to my inside, cut from my left as I step back with my right foot. Do that a couple times. I can take a step forward, so I'm passing forward and backward with my left foot instead, but I'm just alternating. Hands will always be on the side of the back foot. After you've done that, switch hands, and remember you also have to slightly switch sides. So I'm not preparing over there, I'm preparing my inside. So, boom, step forward with the wrong foot. Anyway, there we go. So, boom, boom. Just like this. Really focus on your edge alignment. This is going to wake up all of those muscles that this hand has that this hand hasn't developed a whole lot yet. Important things to focus on is when you're doing this, make sure that, like for example, I'm going to step forward with an inside cut, make sure that I am only stepping forward once the cut is actually making it to its target. I am not doing that number. That kind of defeats the purpose. After this is done, your arm should be feeling pretty good right now. And I recommend just doing same sets as before, so 4. After this is done, we're going to go ahead and move into doing some Geisling type techniques. So real quick, what is a Geisling? Because I've brought it up briefly in my cut the leg video, but I want to go into a little more detail. So Geisling means whipping. And what a Geisling essentially is I am going to whip my sword through a cut at your legs, releasing with my dominant hand so that I can get the maximum amount of reach. For a while, it was everyone's go-to in competition. It was very obnoxious. But a simple leg void defends against it. However, if we use the Geisling slowly, it's going to actually give us some decent shoulder stability work. So here's how this works. You're going to do 3 Geislings at ascending levels, and then 1 casting of the fool. What is casting of the fool? Casting of the fool is a term that comes from English longsword, which is where I'm going to cut straight down from the top. It's really only useful in very particular circumstances. I got it off once because a guy misjudged his distance. But either way, here's how these look. Go ahead and go up in the high vom tag. I'm going to release, cut at the ankle, return, release, cut at the middle, return, release, cut at the eyes, return, cast the fool, back. So low, middle, high, down. What this will give you is it'll give you some more stability. And over the course of what we've just done, you've worked pretty much every joint and major motion that you might need in this hand, with the exception of the thumb grip, because you don't need the thumb grip on this hand. So what does this all get you? What this gets you is, 1, you'll be more cognizant of your left hand, because what you can start thinking about is the idea of, okay, well, if I were to cut with just my left hand, I have to really make sure I extend it like that. Same thing if I were just cutting with my right hand. So if I add both together, there's that nice snappy cut I'm looking for. Things like that. It'll also get this guy more awake. And in the instances that you might take, for example, your left hand off, this will now be coordinated enough to launch an attack and then possibly defend yourself if that attack fails. I've had to use that recently, and I'm very glad I did this. It also gives you better point control on both hands, because there's nothing worse than closing in with someone and then just not having any noodle strength here. Speaking of which, I actually forgot one of the Geislings, which is, now we'll do our thrusts. So, a Geisling thrust looks like this. You have 2 sides to do. If I am on my right side, I'm going to release with my lead hand, extend with a small lunge, keeping my hand here, then I'm going to retract. So, boom, boom, just like that. If you switch sides, now you're going to be using a little bit of hip chamber. So I'm going to extend with my hip. I don't want to step forward off of this guy. Boom, boom. Okay? Just 4 of those is pretty good. So, that's my sword in one hand little workout / warm up. Don't overdo it. I really recommend you only go through it once before you practice, maybe twice if you're feeling froggy. But that's a particularly good little guy that I've been doing, and I've been seeing results. So play around with it. Let me know what you think. Otherwise, though, we'll go over some more techniques another time.